welcome to the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. We're on episode 12 with Nessim Btesh, and I'm your host, Isaiah Bollinger from Trellis. Unfortunately, our co-host is not with us today, Timothy. We were both had some vacation time, so we kind of decided to each do one separately. So we'll be back to normal after this episode. Before we get into it, I just want to mention our sponsor, Punch Out To Go. Punch Out To Go has been a great sponsor for us and is a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. So, essentially they're connecting e-commerce platforms with clients' e-procurement and ERP applications to automate the flow of purchasing data, so you can immediately reduce integration complexities for punch-out catalogs, electronic purchase orders, e-invoices, and other B2B sales order automation documents. So thank you to Punch Out To Go. And yeah, let's get into it. Nessim Btesh is with us. He's a technology manager of Nortex. I hope I'm saying that right, Nortex. And he has been in software development his entire career.
Yeah.
And kind of fell into B2B e-commerce, which I think everyone in B2B e-commerce sort of falls into at some point in their career, although some people may have done it purposefully. But like myself, he kind of fell into e-commerce and then B2B e-commerce. So Nessim, it's confusing combining your last name and your first name. So Nessim, give us a little bit more on your background and how you kind of got into this e-commerce world.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I think it's amazing that you're doing a podcast on B2B because there's absolutely no information out there. I think that it would be really helpful when I started to be able to have somewhere to go and somewhere to hear about what everybody else is doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, so I guess my background is mostly software development. Throughout my career, I helped startups mostly develop software products around, more specifically around data analytics, and across multiple industries. So I started in the restaurant industry and then went into other type of softwares, data analytics, martech, and stuff like that. And it was actually funny. I got into B2B e-commerce because my H-1B didn't come out when I was living in Boston. I had to move back to Panama with my wife, and I went to work with my family business. And it just came about that I arrived in Panama and I saw that nobody was actually working on digitizing the company. And for me, that was I wanted to keep working in what I liked. I had 10 years working in sort of the software industry, and when I keep doing that, I didn't want to stop because I was really passionate about it. And and I guess I took it upon myself on taking the company online. So I went back and I started pulling all the strings to move the company towards in a selfish way, towards what I wanted to go, towards what I envisioned that the future was going to be, which was essentially B2B commerce. Yeah.
And I'm sure you didn't predict
short story.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sure you didn't predict COVID-19, the coronavirus, so that probably changed things quite a bit for you guys and probably made you feel good about the decision because you probably helped them be in a better place during this time. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was the best worst thing that happened to us was, on the one side, you lost a lot of your sales because everything closed down, but on the other side, it helped push forward my vision. So it helped push forward the digitalization of the company. From one day to the next, you had from 10% of the sales go online to 100%. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So basically, showrooms are now worthless. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So quite a big shift for you guys. Tell me a little bit, since you have a very technical background, tell me a little bit about, so we talked kind of about your background and how you got into B2B e-commerce. And I think we talked earlier, and originally you guys were using Shopify, quickly realized that wasn't a good decision, and then you decided to go with more of a custom solution. Can you talk a little bit about that and how, for people that are new to this, they might do what you did. They might say, "Oh, I need Shopify," and then realize it's not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So we started at first with Shopify, and we soon came into the realization that Shopify wasn't going to work, just because Shopify was built to manage sort of like really small catalogs, and we had like a huge, like immense catalogs, and it wasn't scaling very well. And a lot of the functionality that usually require for the business complexity in B2B, Shopify did not allow for that. And we went through several iterations where we wanted to try Shopify Plus, and then the Shopify Wholesale Edition, and like none of them actually worked. So what we actually ended up doing, it was really funny because we were in a meeting with the VP of Shopify and telling him how we modify his platform to work with our industry, which essentially it backfired. So what we did is we used like some custom fields that Shopify has built in, and that you weren't supposed to use them for like have all the advanced pricing. And it eventually backfired because the platform became really slow and it like collapsed the entire team. So what we decided is, I remember perfectly, we met with the entire team one day, and we said like we need to find a new solution. And we had a fair, we had to go into the fair in 2 months. So basically we had 2 months to develop the entire platform. And we started looking into, let's say, like WordPress, and we looked into other more advanced software that were in like 100,000 to 200,000 range. And we saw the solutions, and what we realized is that our business was so complex that none of these softwares allow for a business to run online. So now that I think about it, it wasn't a very smart decision, but it was probably the best decision that we had at the moment. So we started developing everything from scratch. We took me myself, actually, back then we didn't have many developers. We only had one working on the ERP and myself, and I took it upon myself to develop the entire sort of B2B platform from scratch, which included everything from advanced pricing, like the everything that you expect in a B2B commerce, but like more personalized, more customized.
Gotcha.
Permission management and everything.
Yeah, so you guys built out a lot of features, and you did this with React. Would you kind of say that you took that headless approach where you had kind of the independent front end, and then you were pulling in data from other sources? Is that kind of where you ended up?
Yes. So I think that. So here's one thing that we realized early on. So when we were in Shopify, we started collecting user data. So like everything from like what browser did they use, what size were their phones, everything. And we built sort of like a custom JavaScript that measured the performance of the devices that the people were using. And we realized that the internet connection that they had were like I guess that in most places in the US, you realize that internet is stable. So your expectation is that the internet works. But in most places in Latin America, that's not the case. So we had that script measuring sort of the internet connection, the stability of the network, and the performance of the devices that we're using. And we realized that we had to build something that was extremely fast, that was extremely reliable on low-end networks, and that was extremely reliable on intermittent internet. So because of that, we decided that the logical reason was to have something that was separated completely from the backend, from like a regular CMS, almost similar to how Shopify and WordPress work, where everything renders in the server. So using Shopify, using React, we had to build something that both rendered in the user side and in the server. So that it allowed for really good SEO, and at the same time allowed for extremely good speed on the like really fast. How do you say it? So like really fast, like really fast response in the user side.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, so you guys went, so it's kind of this term called headless is the term
yeah.
people are using, like headless commerce. So what that means is they're using a framework like React. I'm trying to explain it for the non-technical people, and you can kind of pull in the data that you need via APIs and potentially even GraphQL and other new technologies. So it only loads the data that you need so you're not kind of constantly reloading the page every time. So I think it's definitely the future. It's definitely faster. It has a lot of flexibility and benefits. And it's great for B2B because with B2B, you might have ERP data, you might have your CMS data, you might have other systems. I mean, some of these B2B companies have lots of different systems, and you can bring that all into the headless front end. So I think that was a really smart decision that you guys made there, just kind of forging ahead with that. I'm sure always in hindsight, there's certain things you would have done differently, but it sounds like it helped you guys move forward in the right direction overall, and has gotten you to a much better place with B2B e-commerce. So I think the lesson here that what you're describing is that if you want to really become fully digital, which is you're saying 100% of sales online, correct? Is that what you're saying now? You need to have insane
Yep.
flex, like you need to kind of really personalize and create a lot of flexibility in the site so that you can accommodate a wide range of use cases and customers. And I think it's really hard to find a platform that's going to do that for a B2B business, because they're all different. They have their own different ways of doing things. So I think you have to be like, even if you choose a platform, let's say Magento or Shopify, you have to be expecting to customize it very heavily. And I think that's the mistake a lot of these companies make, is they think, oh, I can buy Magento, I can buy Insight, and now I'm just going to get my B2B e-commerce up and running. But it's like, okay, but really you're going to need to customize it. You need engineers, whether it's paying someone like us, Trellis, or hiring someone like you, Nessim. Like, there's a big lift there, regardless, I think, of what technology. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I think that there are limitations if you buy something that's already like made, so that's already built. So if you use Magento or WordPress or anything like that, I think that that's a complexity in the B2B world, that there's a lot of these business run really complex like processes that need to
For
build
sure.
into the software, and the benefit of going headless, which is having the front end separate from the back end, is that you can integrate with 100 different systems. It's like, for example,
Exactly.
we have the CMS backend, but then we also have another sort of or 3 different applications integrated into us, which include like serverless code in AWS, and includes other applications we built throughout the way.
Yeah, so you guys are starting to slowly, and I think that's the future. It's like you have certain applications for specific purposes. Maybe CMS just does
Yeah.
blogs, pages, certain kinds of content. ERP does orders, customers. You might have a CRM that's separate from the
Yeah.
ERP. You might have a PIM that just does product. All of a sudden you could have the best backend for the specific purpose, and then bring that into the front end with headless. And I think that's where B2B needs to head. It's just hard for, I think, a lot of B2B companies to wrap their head around this when they're still just trying to get a basic website up and running. So
Yeah, for sure.
Here, while we're still on the topic and we're kind of jumping around, you mentioned, I think there's so much that we can get into in terms of what's different with B2B and from B2C. Could you talk a little bit about what you think some of the key differentiators are? Like, you talked about personalization, large catalogs. Like, what are you like, you're not just selling t-shirts on Shopify. Can you explain like some of the key things that you think come up in B2B e-commerce that aren't necessarily as relevant in B2C?
You know that I've think about I've thought about this a lot, and which is the hard question of B2B. I think that most B2C commerce are built for, let's say, to manage 3 or 4 products at a time, or maybe you have some crazy users buying like 10 products at a time. But most B2B users are gonna buy like a few. If you go into the large site, they're gonna have carts anywhere from 500 products to, let's say, like 1,000 or 2,000 products.
Wow.
And you know that I didn't think about this because I knew how to buy on Amazon. I knew how to use an e-commerce, be a B2C commerce, but I never thought about it using it in a world of B2B. And in a B2C, you go in and you see maybe 100 products, and these platforms are optimized for product discovery, as opposed to in a B2B, you need to optimize for ease of navigation. Because the thing is that in a B2B world, you need to look let's say 5,000 products in a spread of like 3 or 4 hours, as opposed to like a B2C, you spend maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes stop. If you really like the website, you buy something and then you check out. So I think it's like a completely different experience. And I think I came into the realization recently that the reason that we're struggling so much in B2B is that we're trying to adopt an e-commerce world from a different buying experience. So like what I mentioned, like we're trying to take the world that is optimized for like half an hour for buying in half an hour, and put it in a world that needs to spend 4 or 5 hours in a website. And I think
Yeah,
that
so you're
that
saying they might go and they're like, okay, I'm building, this construction project. I need, these 100 materials or 200 materials, or this really complex like buying process of all these,
Mhm.
they need good pricing. They need to get the right sizes, the right exact inventory. So they might have a cart of 100, 200, 300, 500 items. They might have order approval, like to send to their manager so that the manager can approve it. It's just like you said, it's like a completely different and more complicated shopping experience than, your B2C. Okay, I just got some beef jerky on Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
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 yeah.
and I think people need to be careful there because you need to optimize the for being very different from the B2C.
Yeah, so I like the idea of like these larger catalogs, larger purchasing processes. Could you get into any of the specifics of what you guys have done around personalization and order approval, or do you have like corporate accounts, or how with B2C you have the simple basic account, you know what I mean? And I think with B2B sometimes that gets a lot more complicated.
So I guess that we had to like add the approval. So before, the approval process was sort of in the checkout where you checked out and then we approved the order. So we had to move the approval process from the checkout to the account creation. So that, let's say that once you get into our funnel, sort of like our sales funnel, we approve you, approve the account, and then everything goes the same way would be in a B2C. But before, that approval process was actually in the checkout. So we had to like change the way we work to be able
Gotcha.
to optimize it for the web.
And when you approve someone to be a buyer or on your website, do you give them special payment terms, like, okay, this person gets net 30, or this person has to pay with credit card because maybe you don't trust them as much? Like, do you guys do anything like that with how you handle their payment terms, or?
No, I mean, we have available every payment method, and they can pay any way they want, as long as they pay.
Gotcha. Okay, so you just give
Yeah.
them lots of
So
options.
yeah, exactly.
What about pricing? Have you guys done anything to kind of like maybe your bigger customers get better pricing? Is there anything like that? Or have you tried to just kind of automate that all through the website?
So it's actually completely automated. So one of the things we build into the software is that once you log in, you get your price, your custom price. So I think throughout the way, most of our clients have a different price than the standard price, which is usually lower, like a discount. And then once you log in into your account, you already have your price set up, everything set up.
So is it when it's automated, do you mean that like, do they over time, if they buy more, they get a better price? Or do you have to manually go in and say, okay, we're going to give this person even a bigger discount? How do you guys like what happens if someone's like, hey, I think I should
Well,
get a better price over time, you know?
the discount depends on the cart size. So the entire order size, yeah.
Gotcha. So you can created
Yeah.
some logic and some rules based on what you think is best for the business, based on cart size and volume, and you're like, okay, at this size, we can give this discount. So it's fairly automated.
Yeah.
And I think that makes
Yeah,
sense. I could see,
yeah.
yeah, I could see the future of B2B e-commerce. Like a lot of companies have this manual pricing. Oh, this customer's bought this, let's give them this price. They have like a lot of manual pricing and kind of like on a per customer basis. But I could see the future being more algorithm driven where, you know, based on categories and cart size and total annual volume that you purchased, and maybe even location, if they're closer, it's easier to ship. Maybe you give them a better price.
Yeah.
I could see kind of the future being more algorithm driven, and it sounds like you guys are starting to move in that direction.
Yeah, so everything is algorithm driven, and so when you're gonna realize that once you log in into your platform, you have to share that location because we have everything built into the algorithm. So we know where
Wow.
you are, where you're, like what's your country, what's your city, and everything. So we build everything into it.
So would the logistics play into the pricing because if they're further away, it's harder to ship? Does that get factored into their pricing, or is it more based on their shipping cost?
I'm gonna say that not yet, but one like soon enough. So
Okay.
it's coming. It's up
Wow,
the
cool.
pipeline. Yeah.
Wow, you
Yeah.
guys are, yeah, this is really cool. So you guys are really driving towards automation. And I'm just curious, how was that with the family, you know, your family business? That's always tough because, you know, it's the it's the family. When you
Yeah.
started automating this stuff, was there problems within the family, or people still wanted to do things the old school way? They wanted the in-person relationships. Like, how did you overcome that, or how do the salespeople stay involved and not feel like they're kind of left out in the company?
So that's a very hard question to answer, and I think I think yeah, you touched every point there. So it's like I guess at first we had a lot of resistance. So that's why I mentioned at the start that I had to sort of like pull the strings from the back without people realizing to shift the company in this direction. A lot of what I thought the world. So where I came from a software background, from a startup background, and most of what you
Yeah.
build in a startup, it's like these amazing softwares that are really automated and don't depend much on people. And I had to like slowly pull the strings of like, let's say, my sisters, my grandfathers, and my, you know what I mean, the entire family, to be able to shift the company in that direction. Um, it was a struggle at first because I guess once you're used to a way of thinking, it's very hard to change that way of thinking.
Yeah.
And changing someone's perspective is hard.
So was there a
So
turning point where like they saw that it was working and they saw that this is doing better, that they were like, oh wow, this is like great? Like, was there a turning point where they started to believe more and trust you more with this? Sorry, I think we're lagging a little bit. Did you hear what I said?
yeah, yes. Can you hear me fine?
Sorry, yeah, I think I can hear you now. Sorry, we're getting my connection's not as good as it normally is. So sorry, continue.
Sure. So I think throughout the way they started to realize it worked maybe like on December. They started to see the value in it, but I guess until coronavirus came, they weren't they weren't 100% convinced, I guess, until like let's say they had to close down the showroom and they had to move everything online. Um,
So coronavirus,
once
they were like, wow,
once
this.
like
Sorry, continue. Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, I think that there's a lag there. So yeah, coronavirus made everything on like forced us to go online essentially.
Cool. So you were kind of ahead of the curve, and then all of a sudden coronavirus hits, and the family's like, "Oh, great, we got to do this because what else are we gonna do?" And now it looks like the right move, and you probably have an easier time convincing them. I'm guessing,
Yeah, for sure.
but I could see how difficult that was before coronavirus. Um, so we kind of touched on these topics a little bit. What do you think is the difference between success and failure? In some ways, you guys had some failures, but you persevered and continued, and then succeeded with the more custom route. And you've had some internal battles with culture and things like that. But let's say you're talking to another family-owned B2B company, and they're struggling. They don't know, or they don't even know where to go. What would you recommend to help them maybe avoid some failures? I think failures are inevitable when you're starting out, but
Sure. I think that my recommendation would be take something from the startup world. And who's your client? What phone do they own? What computer do they own? How's their internet connection? How are they used to buying online? So it's actually something very funny. If you go onto our website, you see that the close icon for or pop-ups or modals are actually quite big, bigger than usual. And the reason for that is that we realized looking at the recordings of the website that most of our users didn't know that if you clicked outside of pop-up, it will remove the pop-up from your screen. They didn't realize how that you can click outside of pop-up to close it. So we had to actually make the closing icons really big so that they were able to see them,
gotcha.
to
Yeah.
see them more easily. So that I think that that's a secret. Understanding who your customer is your customer very like does your customer is the customer the type of person that requires an app in the phone, or is a person that um, that knows how to use an e-commerce? Is he used to buying on Amazon, or is he used to going to their sort of like their pain points, I guess. And that's my best recommendation. Like you have success, you will have success if you understand who your client is, who your user is.
And how they buy. Yeah. So basically what you're saying is you want to tailor it around
Yeah.
what the buying expectations are of the customer, and if they're familiar with a certain type of experience, maybe try and do something closer to that experience so that it's less of a learning curve for them. Then,
Yeah, and the other thing is that don't take this from B2C, which is B2C sort of experience in the website is more like open to interpretation as opposed to like in B2B, you have to guide the user through a certain path. You want to go through like a certain path in your website to guide the sale, as opposed to like leaving it open up for the user.
gotcha. So you think it should, yeah, it makes sense. So when you're a consumer, you're like, oh, I'm exploring, I'm learning, oh, maybe I want this, maybe I don't. You're kind of shopping, right? Whereas with B2B, you're trying to
Yeah.
guide them. They might, okay, I want these materials. You're trying to guide them through that process to make it easier for them to buy it and get what they need.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, I think we're my internet connection is not the greatest right now, so I apologize
I
for
think we have
that.
some lag there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry about the internet right now. Um, so what do you see as kind of the future of B2B e-commerce? I think we've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but you know, what would you say your kind of your vision is for the next 5 years? As you hopefully grow this and automate more of this and turn this into something that could be, I think, really really amazing in South America. That doesn't There's not a whole lot. There's not as much of an Amazon presence in South America, right? So I think there's a little bit more of a opportunity there for you guys.
That's a hard question. So on one side, there's like there's a trend, there's a trend from direct to consumer brands that are usually cheaper because they remove sort of the operational cost of a B2B and they give that benefit to the consumer. So that's
Yeah.
on one side. But on the other side, I would say that there's a huge space, especially in Latin America, to offer sort of like a B2B that's completely digitized, that the experience is completely digitized. And the reason for that is that you see that most of the companies are still working the way they used to 20 years ago or 10 years ago, where they have a pen and paper and they write everything down and then they send it to the customer and they select what they want, or they have like a printed catalog that they have to ship with DHL to be able to select products. And I'm seeing that again and again in a lot of companies. And I say, in the largest companies, sort of like the ones that are supposed to be the more advanced, you see them that they have a website, but they have a very basic website and they don't have any know-how into how to build like a really good experience around B2B commerce. And so I see a lot of opportunity there. So like taking digitizing the entire sort of selling experience, and that's one thing especially in Latin America. But another recommendation would be to anyone headless for a B2B commerce. It's actually very beneficial because, like you said, you're able to bring all your systems together into one UI, one seamless UI, and it's completely, the user doesn't realize that he's using about 10 different platforms and he's thinking that he's in the same website. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have to shift them throughout different.
Yeah. So would you say, to sum that up, the future is kind of this digitized, more automated experience where you have this kind of unified front end, but then you have all these different systems in the back end kind of optimizing different processes and automating different processes. And as we move, that will get more and more advanced, maybe more pricing logic, more shipping logic, more advanced logic to personalize around the use cases.
Yeah. So yeah, I loved your episode. I think it was the last episode where you said that there was a drone that was going into the pipes and looking for the parts that need a replacement.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And I think
like,
that
yeah. Sorry, continue. Go ahead.
And I think that's a way to go. So like automate a lot of those things that you used to do very manually and digitize them.
Yeah. So even people out in the field, they can just call in a part and get it delivered in real time. There's a break in something and they're out in the field, or because B2B, you're dealing with people that are contractors, all sorts of different types of people, and they might be out working and then they need a replacement part or they need something on demand in real time. And I think that real time delivery experience is gonna come to B2B e-commerce.
Yeah.
Cool.
Exactly.
So any last remarks? I mean, I think I apologize for the bad internet today. I'm not at my normal location, but Any kind of closing remarks or advice you'd have for anyone before we kind of wrap this up, or?
Yeah, sure. So my advice would be to anyone that wants to start in the B2B commerce is think about, take something from the startup world, take something from the tech world, think about the user, understand who they are. Like I mentioned before, that I think that's a key to success.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
that would
really,
be, I guess, my advice.
cool. So really understand your user, your buyer, how they buy, how you can digitize that and make it easier for them to buy online, and maybe even like, do some use cases or talk to them or walk them through a prototype or something like that. I could see how that could be very valuable before you do the full investment in the full-fledged product. Well, thank you so much, Nessim. I think we're going to have you back. I want to see what you guys are up to in like a year from now. I can imagine you guys are going to have even more automation, more advanced rules and innovation that I think you guys have a lot to be proud of, especially in a place like South America where, like you said, most things are still very, pen and paper. And you guys, I think, are one of the more advanced B2B e-commerce companies that I've talked to, including all the US companies that we deal with. So really great information. Once again, I apologize for the laggy internet. Hopefully everyone can still understand the messaging and the value that we provided. And I hope everyone can come back for episode 13 with Mark Sutherland, who's been in the B2B space for quite some time. So thank you so much, Nessim.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experience and share my knowledge. I think what you're doing here, it's amazing. There's a huge, I think there's a lot to cover, actually.
I know.
And I'm excited to join you again next year.
Yeah, I think I'm excited to see what you're up to. So we'll make it happen, and I'm sure you're going to wow us with some even more advanced innovation in a year or so from now. Thank you.